This is a joint initiative by NewsX and Business World. Joining me on the broadcast are a set of panelists. Today's discussion, when it comes to Bharat Atmanirbhar Mission, is about corporate social responsibility and sustainability. Joining me, as usual, is Dr. Anurag Batra, who is the Editor-in-Chief and Chairperson of Business World. Also joining me on the broadcast is Dr. Madhukar Gupta, who is an IAS. Vivek Sagar, who is the founder and CEO of Hopcure, Adarsh Kataruka, who is the founder and CEO of Solace, Mugdha Pradhan, who is the founder Trive Ethnic, and Suvrat Khanna, who is the co-founder and CEO of Verve Renewable. All of them join me on the broadcast. Welcome on the show, gentlemen and ladies. And Dr. Anurag Batra, over to you. Today, when we talk about CSR and sustainability, how exactly are we going ahead and fighting this battle, especially in wake of the pandemic?
Thank you so much, Megha. The last 7 months have made sure that every business needs to be a social enterprise.
Yeah.
We don't have to have separate categories. Every business needs to have a social impact. We have to look after our bottom of the pyramid. And, I must congratulate the government on making sure that food reach was given to this large bottom of the pyramid that we have, and in some way that prevented the social tensions that could have happened. However, today what we're discussing is, in the last 7 months, most of the CSR money has gone into the PM Relief Fund. It has gone into hospitals and temporary healthcare facilities that have been put up for COVID. It has gone into providing food and shelter to homeless. So what is the new direction for CSR? And again, you cannot keep CSR away from sustainability, because we have to embrace the triple bottom line. So to discuss that, we've got experts who operate in this ecosystem. Let me bring in, and most importantly, I say that, education institutions are closed. There's only virtual learning. A lot of CSR money would be directed towards, schools. Suppose if the
All right, there seems to be an audio connection problem over here with Dr. Anurag Batra's line, but let me throw this open to Mugdha Pradhan. Mugdha Pradhan, let's discuss about CSR and sustainability. And Dr. Anurag Batra rightly mentioned that in the time of need, the pandemic, where hundreds and thousands have gotten together to go ahead and help those who have been suffering at this point of time, who have lost jobs. There were hunger problems, migrant issue, labor problems were the ones that were escalating. And it is at this point of time that corporate social security, social responsibility of corporates needs to come forward. And in fact, hundreds and thousands of corporates have come out together to go ahead and help out in every single way that they can for the greater good of the society. Because at the end of the day, that's what binds our society, that's what binds our community, and that's how businesses thrive.
Yep. So, this is very interesting, right? Because so I work in health, and I actually work on reversing chronic diseases, and this pandemic has brought everyone's attention on health. It's brought health to the forefront. And even when I was in corporates, before I started my own company, CSR was always focused on education, uplifting the lower economic strata of the society and all of that. And I think what happened in this pandemic, like you rightly mentioned, that the labor force, the migrant workers, they were impacted big time. But you know what, somewhere there I think, making it CSR and asking corporates to step in where this is something that the government also could have, managed slightly differently. Like we had this PM Cares Fund that was generated when COVID struck. And in this also, like for me, my entire focus, even when I look at how society can change, comes from the perspective of health. Because if you look at economies, if you look at how countries are, the ones with the poorest healthcare systems usually have the worst economy, right? If you look at the developed nations, they have pretty robust healthcare systems. And health of the population determines how productively they can contribute to the economy as well. And, even in this economic stimulus that was done for COVID, there was the PM Cares Fund that happened, and healthcare was allocated like 7,500 crores from the economic, that stimulus fund. 2,500 crores from PM CARES Fund, and India's population is like 130 crores. Per capita, this amount literally comes to like rupees 70 per head. So, are we really expecting corporates to step in? And 70 rupees per head is not enough for regular healthcare. Forget about what's happening to people with COVID and the other underlying health issues which are really making COVID the problem that it is. Are we really expecting corporates to come in and fulfill this gap and create a boost for the economy? I don't know if that's a fair expectation at all. But that being said, I think what was done, the amount of compassion that was showed, how people pooled in and did everything that they could for the people who were suffering the most, I think that is something that is really pretty amazing when you look at the social fabric that we have as a country.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Priyanka and Mugdha, I want to bring in Mr. Madhukar Gupta. The point I was trying to make is that corporates are focused on their own survival while they're trying to be good citizens. Where will the budgets from CSR come? Because right now the focus is their own revenues have been hit. They have to survive themselves to be able to be sustainable and then be able to help. Mr. Madhukar Gupta, what do you think will happen from a CSR standpoint as we go forward?
Anurag, I think you raised a very important issue. I don't know, I've handled this folder for the Government of India for the last 5 years, more than 5 years. Well, I don't know why these two acronyms are always said together, CSR and sustainability. So I don't think there's any nexus between the two. So I just wanted to make this point in the beginning itself. Somehow down the way, this acronym sustainability has stuck to CSR. Anything that we do apart from CSR also has to be sustainable. That, if we see the total scenario at the macro level, so India is expected to spend about 16,000 crores every year on CSR. Now the core businesses, when they are seeing a downside, especially with Corona, even otherwise the economy is down. So obviously the profits are going to come down. And when the profits come down, how do you allocate funds for this unforeseen emergency like Corona? So there are issues of providing funds for handling Corona. The funds which have been allocated from CSR budgets, whether they have gone to the PM CARES Fund or otherwise, are too small, as was said earlier by Mugdha, are too small to really handle the issue. At the same time, when this act was being modified, was being amended in 2013, the government could have easily imposed a cess of 2% had they wanted additional funding, additional revenues for development. They could have easily imposed the cess. But in their wisdom, they didn't do that. They allowed corporate India to be more innovative, to use technology, to be more efficient, more creative, and do things themselves. And I have been on most of these high-part committees where we have literally fought with people who wanted to put riders on the provisions which have been made under CSR in the Companies Act. So if we curtail the liberty of corporations, then it can't be created. So, and also, if corporations also have to follow the same path which government has followed, which district magistrates have followed, what's the big deal? Why should corporate India be involved in this business of development? Their bottom lines are more important, their core competence is somewhere else. But then, as these 5-6 years have rolled by, I have seen great things happening. From the first, second years, when people didn't know, they didn't have a clue about what was really happening. Now people have a much better sense. Corporate India has a much better sense of where to go, which direction to take. Corona, yes, funds have been diverted, but then if you compare it with the Spanish flu in 1918, Spanish flu also just vanished after about a year or so, after more than a year. So possibly Corona also will just fade away one of these days.
Hopefully earlier than a year, Mr. Gupta. Because in 7 months, it's caused so much devastation. We wouldn't want it to be there another 5 months, but we understand what you were driving at. And only thing I'd say, I keep saying that Tatas have been doing CSR and sustainability both for many, many years as part of their existence. Look at Jamshedpur. And you know, the triple bottom line should matter to corporates. And I think it can create a sustainable advantage for all the stakeholders. And I also keep saying that Mother Teresa was the world's first social entrepreneur without being called so, because she really made a difference to the poor, downtrodden, and she did it in an institutional way. So she was the kind of leader of that moment. Let me bring in Adarsh. Adarsh, over the last few years, you've been tracking CSR funds. Most importantly, you've been making sure that the impact of the usage of CSR funds is tracked. As they say, what can be measured can be improved. Give us a sense, how have the CSR funds been utilized in the last 7 months, and give us some top line in terms of what the impact has been.
Sure, thanks Anurag. CSR has actually gone through a mixed bag in the last 7 months, and as we've been working in the CSR space much before the law came in. It's been 11 years, and we've been tracking year on year how companies have responded. It was great to see the day of the lockdown. Within the next day, corporates started thinking out of the box how they can. So it was not. I would like to also mention CSR is not only about the funds. When you talk about a Tata Group, when you talk about a Mahindra Group, a Bajaj Group, you're also bringing in a lot of expertise, the manpower expertise, the technology expertise, the reach, which is unparalleled. So that is a big contribution which was coming from the corporate side. So if you see in the last 7 months, what has happened is, one, obviously there's been large donation to the PM CARES Fund, especially by the public sector organizations. But at the same time, there was a fair amount of work which happened on the relief measures with the migrant workers, providing hygiene.
You know, someone's phone's ringing or something is ringing, causing a sound resonance. So one of you can minimize that, it would help the broadcast.
Yeah, there seems to be a constant buzz, which is yes. I think now it's a more it's a
Go
more
on, others.
Yeah. So yes, what I was saying was that from a relief measures perspective, companies came out forward, looking at the migrant laborers, the slum workers, at the rural level as well, looking at watershed programs. So corporates have also been trying to think out of the box in terms of how they can contribute, not only from financial perspective. Another very interesting part which people do not realize is that the fund has not been an issue this year. CSR is actually average profits of the last 3 years. So this year's performance is not considered when we are talking about CSR budget. And we are talking about the last 3 years profit average, the 2% is what companies are going to spend this year. And some of the companies have also gone forward and they realize that even if they utilize the CSR budget, this is a exceptional year, so they're not holding back. The corporates are not holding back, they are looking at out of the box. At the same time, there are certain challenges as well in terms of there are a lot of projects which are happening in the nutrition space with the Anganwadis being shut. So we are also looking at a bigger challenge when we talk about malnutrition in the country. And that needs to be tackled in a much, and again, that's a very grave challenge as well, because all the years of effort, there is a danger that we might, if we don't take the right steps at the right time, and it has to be a public-private partnership. The pandemic is such that even corporates are looking at government interventions, partnerships, NGOs coming together. So this year what we have seen is, otherwise companies are always willing to work alone, but the pandemic has brought everyone together. So now they are saying, can we look at collaborations? Can we look at government partnerships? Can we look at corporate partnerships? So we are seeing a lot of innovative projects happening where 5 companies are coming together. They are pooling in their own resources. And this has happened a lot in Mumbai, where BMC was taking a lead. They started reaching out to corporates for specific work. Just to give you an example of a Taj Hotel, they were supporting hospitals, the doctors and the nurses with foods. So hotels said they can do that, and that is what they came forward.
So you're
with.
saying the contribution was not just the
Exactly.
money, it was in kind, in terms
kind,
of providing them a service or a product that could help them do the job of fighting Corona or COVID
exactly,
better.
exactly. And that there has been, so companies have come forward and used technology. Companies are looking at, because they have technological prowess, so they're coming forward and seeing that how we can leverage technology to reach the underprivileged section. Solace, we also use our technology of tracking, of monitoring and tracking and a project manager, which we made complementary. When Corona came in, the NGOs which are working, we made our platforms completely complementary for NGOs to track and use. So there have been different kinds of initiatives how companies have come forward. So there has been opportunities, at the same time there's a lot of challenges, especially when I look at the nutrition space and the education space. Because what happens is, we are talking about online classes. Online classes is good for a private school. But what about children who are in the government school in a rural belt?
There's a digital divide that has been created.
There's a big they do not have access to smartphones. They don't have access to quality content. Where if they don't have smartphones, how are the teachers going to reach out to them? So there's a genuine challenge at levels.
Adarsh, I want to ask you this question, and I want a specific input. I know you're a deep dive expert in this domain. With the profits of the companies over the last 6 months having gone down, and in spite of the recovery, they may not meet their last year's numbers. What do you think it will have an impact on what areas? Will you see the shrinkage of CSR budgets in the coming 6 months?
In fact, as Anurag, I said, the CSR budget, this for 2021 is actually the average of last 3 years. So in fact, the challenge is going to be for the subsequent years. Even for 21-22, because if this year the company's profits goes down, that will affect the CSR budget for the next financial year as well. So it is a continuous cycle which we are looking at, and it's not a one-time cycle.
I hope corporate India does well, and more importantly, they give even in a larger measure beyond the number that is stipulated by law. They go beyond that and they make their contribution count. Vivek, let me bring you in. Vivek, you heard Mr. Madhukar Gupta, you heard Mugdha, you heard Adarsh. What do you have to add to the conversation, and what do you think will happen over the next 6 months?
So, Anurag rightly said, when you took examples of Tatas or when you took example of Mother Teresa, see, CSR from Indian perspective is a cultural issue. Okay, whether this is an Indian perspective, whether this is an individual perspective or a corporate perspective, giving is in our tradition. And I guess even if the budgets of corporates have shrinked, I guess the willingness for individuals also to come out and help, and we have seen that ample times in during the last COVID period, that whether these are individuals, societies, families, organizations, corporates, associations, cooperative societies, they have come out and openly helped the people who are needy. So to me, it is just not a responsibility from a corporate perspective, but it is more of a cultural issue that has been very well explained and demonstrated during the COVID period. Now, from a company perspective, what I'm seeing now is, see, they have two major issues to worry about: the assets, how to protect the assets, and how to protect the revenue. Now, in assets, both the infra is there as well as the manpower. Now, the manpower is severely hit. The morale of the manpower is severely hit. 7 months working from home is not an easy thing. With family of 5 living in a 2-bedroom flat for 7 months under one roof is not an easy thing. It has helped, it has impacted adversely. Whether this is, and the way things are coming out now, we have a new economy companies, we have old economy companies. The old economy companies are finding it, are struggling in terms of in continuity from during work from home, whereas new economy companies are finding it easy to do a work from home. So many of people whom we know have shifted complete office premises to work from home, and it is making their life easier. But what we have seen is, when coming to protecting the assets, is how do you keep the workforce motivated? how do you ensure that the mental health of your employees is also as good as your physical assets? And this is where some of the recent guidelines and the issues that were addressed by government were very welcome. In fact, IRDA came out with a notification mandating mental health to be part of the insurance policies. Mental health to be included as a pre-existing disease in the insurance policies. These are welcome moves. Nobody worried about it. But if 58 million people in India are depressed, or 38 million people in India have anxiety, and that gets increased further because of COVID situation, then of course something needs to be done for that segment. And the way government has responded with insurance policies to include mental health, or overall spending 150 billion rupees on the healthcare infrastructure, and we all know how shady the healthcare infrastructure of the country is. So I guess we have for our healthcare industry, it's a Y2K moment. Yeah, I mean, we all have lived through that journey where we had a before 2000, after 2000 time. And it's a Y2K moment. The healthcare is getting completely reformed. The way people are looking at healthcare is also getting completely reformed. And that is where I see the corporates also, the way they are looking at the employees and the mental health, the employees is also getting completely reformed. I come from an online mental health counseling company. I run the company, and I have seen the kind of pressure on our psychologists continuously. The business has, the calls have gone multiple.
Yeah, there is a paucity in terms of trained psychologists and counselors.
Exactly.
That's another aspect. I think we need to create more of them. But let me bring in Surat. Surat, again, you run a renewables company, and tell us, as an entrepreneur, as a company, what is the kind of CSR you've done in the last 6-7 months, and what do you think is impactful when you adopt the CSR strategy? Surat?
Hi. So we are working at the village level, where we are helping farmers make use of all the resources available to them. One such resource is the stubble that they have after they harvest, which is of course a huge pollution menace.
Just to tell you, yesterday the AQI in Delhi was 300, and it's only going to get worse. And we don't worry with COVID and the AQI coming together. It can be a deadly cocktail for diseases. The old people whose respiratory functions are weak, young children, or people who have asthma and they have breathing disorders. It just complicates it. So if you can solve that issue, I think you can help a lot of people. Go on, Surat.
Well, we are working towards that. So what we are really saying is that we create these opportunities at the village level. So that, the number of people at the village level that maybe have been affected by COVID is very huge. These are the people at the bottom of the pyramid. What we want to do is create enough opportunities for them at the village level, and also make them use the resources that are available to them. The government is now really pushing for this renewable energy, and what that does is it increases farmers' income, it cuts down the pollution, and it gets us more and more green energy and less dependence on fossil fuels. And the more and more this can be done at the village level, the lesser people have to leave villages to go to cities and work there, and not have a situation like they've had in the past.
Okay, so Mukta, I want to ask you, in this COVID environment, everybody's too focused on self-care, self-preservation. While Vivek rightly talked about stories of individuals, of institutions helping migrant labor. Tell us, do you think sustainability and CSR in a deep way is in the mind of people who run companies, or it is something they just do for PR? I want an honest answer. What do you feel, Mukta?
Well, okay. So the honest answer is probably a majority of the companies might be doing it for PR. At least in the past, they might have done it for PR, or just to meet that quota, right? Like this is
imagine we had to bring out a law to be able to
exactly right
for CSR. So while we are a culture, Vivek, as you rightly said, we give, but I think we're very hypocritical. in the way.
Anurag, so yeah, I find it funny that the government makes these laws that forces. See, if somebody wants to give, they give, right? Without having like, if I had to give something to my sister, I wouldn't need a law to say that, okay, I have to give something to my sister, right? It's the same with CSR. If somebody is generous of heart, they'll do it. A lot of the CSR funds and activities might have been done for PR, but I think now in what this situation did is it brought to everyone's attention how fragile the human state is. And I think that fragility and that vulnerability kind of made people realize the importance of community. So, initially everybody was about isolation, and I think, in my honest opinion, the economy was not busted because of COVID-19. COVID-19, because I've researched this for like the last 6 months. The first thing I did when, Wuhan started reporting cases, I went to WHO on their website and became a partner of one of their programs. So COVID-19 essentially still remains, if you look at the symptoms, if you look at whatever happens, it is still very much like a flu virus. It's a strain of an influenza virus that impacts people who have underlying health conditions really badly. Did COVID-19 crash our economy and make this like a global problem? Not really. What really did that was the lockdowns that the governments imposed, right? So I'm coming to your question.
And now there is a fear factor.
Yeah.
I can tell you, I have 300 employees. I've given them a choice. I do sales meetings which are physical. Only 50% of my sales people come, and it's voluntary. I don't want to afford.
Right.
But in large corporates like e-commerce companies, not 7 to 8% of the workforce is actually turning up for work. In spite of things being better. So there is a fear factor. I don't know how many people go to cinema halls, what the numbers of hotels are. Somebody who flies Adarsh is my friend from MDI, we went to the same business school, of course, many years apart. He knows I fly at the drop of a hat. I haven't flown for 7 months. I have to go to Pune for the last 3 weeks. Every week I postpone. So there is a fear factor in everyone's mind.
Yeah,
doesn't matter who you are an owner of a company or a CEO or an executive or a white collar worker or a blue collar worker. There is a fear, and we all have to work to be able to keep our companies going. So we also have to. And for a lot of people, they're forced to work because if they don't work, there's no livelihood. Plus, mentally, they've got used to working 14 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours, depending on what they do.
So in fact, in fact, you know what, Anurag, a lot of that fear comes because it feels like an unknown thing that's attacking humanity, right? And I know we are on TV right now, but partly I think media is to be blamed about how this has been portrayed. Because I'm telling you, I have been doing this work of reversing chronic diseases, even insulin resistance, deficiencies, which really make COVID-19 end up with bad outcomes, right? I've had patients who are 65 years old, 70 years old, who got diagnosed with COVID, who are COVID positive, and because of the work they've done on their health, nothing happened. Like it was just 2 days of getting a mild cold and recovering from that. So this fear that you're speaking of, that is also stalling the economy and preventing us from really getting back on track, right? This fear comes from lack of knowledge of what is it that you can do for your own health that will make you immune as a community. So truly in a situation where there's a viral respiratory illness that's going around, your community is your immunity. Your herd immunity is what will really...
But I was watching CNN last night.
I will have to interrupt Anurag and Mugdha Bhaiya. And Mugdha, while you make very interesting points, could we go ahead and a little bit of controversy over there, because worldwide and in the United States as well, Dr. Fauci coming about and saying that we cannot go ahead and rely on herd community, and a lot of people being extremely not cautious about wearing masks, not cautious about social distancing, not cautious about utilizing your sanitizers. So that is the cause of concern, because you can rely on your community, but to which extent is the question that is being asked at this point.
Right. And it really, so it comes back down to this question of that Anurag had asked.
Yes,
but it comes down to basically building your own immune system, taking care of yourself in such a way that you will build immunity towards a virus, right? So yes, wearing, maybe if somebody is infected and maybe if they're sneezing a lot, at that time if they wear a mask, yes, it might prevent, the droplets from traveling a certain distance. But in the end, the focus, as always, when it comes to any disease, should be about, taking care, like learning what it means to really be healthy, to really be immune. if people learned that, honestly, it's still my opinion, if people learned how to do that, then there wouldn't be such a fear, right? Like, you wouldn't be afraid of a virus, and then you would actually. So I think really as corporates, our responsibility is to do that for our employees, for our people,
so,
for our
Madhukar,
clients.
let me ask you,
Yeah,
was this about
absolutely.
CSR and
Generating a lot of
sustainability?
awareness, educating people about it,
Yes.
also utilizing those protocols on a daily basis, practical basis. So you look and you do it and you perform it, and then you learn and you utilize it back at your homes and with your family as well. And my question to Madhukar Gupta over here. Madhukar Gupta, you have had a hands-on experience. You have been going ahead and you had in your former capacity, the position that you held with regards to the public enterprises, the Joint Secretary Public Enterprises for the government. You had gone ahead and also actively participated in the CSR activities that had been undertaken for the Bhuj devastation that had happened because of the earthquake. If you could tell us and discuss with us how that entire procedure happened at the first place, what were the step-by-step actions that were taken at the first place? Also, if such a model can be replicated in various measures, not just for a natural calamity happening, but something that could be replicated in other regions, other communities, other corporates as well, in their day-to-day lives, for safeguarding the lives and the fortunes of the less privileged in our society.
I used to work for the UN Development Program at that time. I was on deputation.
Okay.
Two things which Vivek Sagar said, took me back to the Gujarat earthquake. That was possibly one of the first mega disasters in our country, where we took cognizance of mental health also. Earlier, the focus was basically on physical health. Trauma was something which was not on the radar screen at all. And a lot of things changed post the Gujarat earthquake. Imagine somebody being just parachuted down on the first day, and when I reached Bhuj in the evening of 26th January in 2001, it appeared as if the whole city had been bombed. And everything was in a disarray. And the first thing which I realized was that we had to take care of ourselves. You can't help others without, taking care of yourself. And the first 1 week, the fear of an epidemic taking place, we had about 10,000 people buried in the old bush town. Just imagine the fear of an epidemic spreading with so many bodies lying around. And for the first time, so many things happened. After that, I was invited by the most premium institutions across the world, including FEMA, Homeland Security in the US, all ACE agencies to talk about what really happened, but then a lot of innovations, including innovations about mental health. At the same time, fear of pestilence, disease, epidemic. And finally, one day somebody said something very profound. And he said, dead bodies don't create disease. So dead don't create disease. It's basically putrefying dead bodies which create disease. As long as you keep them away from water, that's fine. Also, we realized that there was value in disposing of the bodies as early as possible. Imagine, we used to fly in, we suggested to the government that they fly in the 5 Karamcharis from Ahmedabad, from Baroda, from Bombay, Surat. Flying those people in the morning, they'll dispose of the bodies, fly them out in the evening. So it was a warlike situation. And as was being mentioned by others, when it's nature against humanity collaborates. So corporates may not have been collaborating in CSR before Corona, but now you see them collaborating.
Yes.
And at that time, it wasn't corporations alone, it was humanity at work. We had people from more than 50 nationalities helping us during that earthquake. And for the first time, I came across professional rescuers. There was a Chinese team. They could communicate with us, but then we gave them shelter in our own tent. So when they were leaving, we wept like old friends. So when you live in those conditions, the bonding is great. At the same time, a lot of knowledge which could have been shared is not shared. I think post-corona also we should share whatever knowledge has been created during the handling of corona. Another thing, Anurag, which I wanted to point out was something which others raised, and I think it's very profound. That the government can explore the possibility of amending the act where, let us say, in a scenario like corona, corporates spend more than 2%, let's say 5%, 8%, whatever, and next year they feel a pressure on their bottom lines. So if the government of India amends the act and gives flexibility to corporations, just like they have given this 3-year period, they can say you spend 2% in 3 years. So if you spend more than 2% this year, next year you can spend less than 2%. So that flexibility, if it is allowed by the Act, I think that will go a long way, because right now, most of the time, the finance managers are juggling with the figures, and they are very careful. They don't want to overspend. So, but then things will vary. Also, at the same time, I'll say the kind of interest India, I don't know, only time will tell. India is the only country in the world which is right now having these provisions in the Corporate Act. There's no other country which presently has these provisions. Likewise, NREGA, for example, something like NREGA, you are spending 50,000 crores a year. The researchers, academics, think tanks across the world are looking at India with great curiosity. So they want to see how India shapes up in NREGA or in CSR. So I think there are points to be proved to the world. Once having initiated these processes, I think we shouldn't be found wanting at a country level, where the world tells us that, well, you were wrong in whatever you did.
Thank you so much, Madhukarji. I want to bring in Vivek. Vivek, a corporate organizing, let's say, mental well-being camp, whether it's a virtual camp or a physical camp, would that fall into CSR? And do you think a lot more money should go into emotional well-being? I mean, Mugdha would know that when we eat more, sometimes we eat because we are distressed. It's a lot of emotional eating because, biologically eating does fulfill a need, so to say. So tell us, should corporates spend a lot of money in terms of emotional well-being, in terms of mental health camps? Is that an area where a lot of money should go in?
So Madhukar, I would put it a little differently. I would say first and foremost, they should take care of their own employees' mental health. They should take care of their own employees' families' mental health, because if families are happy, if the employees are happy, the productivity would be naturally higher. What I have seen in the last 2-3 months is there's a continuous struggle between the finance managers and the HR managers of the organizations when it comes to the topic of how much to spend for employees' mental well-being. Okay, and our push has been that even if you increase it by, let's say, 600-700 rupees per employee for the next 3 to 4 months, and instead of putting this money in advertisement or some other places where the noise is too high, maybe you would be able to get higher productivity.
Vivek, for some of the brands and business, advertising is a necessity. I keep saying, in good times, you should advertise, but in bad times, you must advertise. So,
exactly.
It is, I'm not saying because I run a media company or I come from that domain, but it is also a demand creator for a lot of, and that means an increased top line and an increased bottom line. So it is a business imperative, if I dare say. So, it's not either or, but I get your point that we need to allocate more money to mental well-being, and you're rightly saying, just do the basics right when it comes to your colleagues and to their family. So let me bring you in. At the end of the day, it was a healthcare crisis that turned into a livelihood crisis, to a business and economic crisis. Mugdha talked about why it happened, because we were ill-informed, there is a fear, so on and so forth. I want to start by asking you, when do you see the Indian business and economy coming back in full bloom? Do you think it is possible in the 6 months, 12 months, or 18 months?
Well, honestly, I think our economy is pretty resilient. I think in about 12 months, demand will come back. I think already it is coming back in some way and form. In our businesses, we can see that the power generators who buy the material from us, the demand is almost back to where it used to be pre-COVID. And going forward, I think we have a huge population and a resilient one, so I don't think there's any problem in terms of getting back. But of course, it's going to take time, and in that time, we are.
And what are the risk factors that could derail? For example, one of them is a second big outbreak of corona. Look at US. It is again gone 1 lakh cases every day. That's a lot of cases in high density areas. So, and they've lost 2,15,000 people already in America. So tell us, what are the risk factors and what can the government do better? Subrat?
See, honestly, the risk factors, the one that you mentioned just now, the fear of COVID is, I think, the largest risk factor just now for everybody. But I guess everybody understands that we have to get on with it now. We don't have a specific time up to when we will not move on. And we tend to see that most people are getting back on with it, of course, with precautions and everything. But that's what we see is happening now.
And Subrat, I want to ask you my last question to you. Is what is that one lockdown lesson that you've learned as an entrepreneur that will hold you in good stead throughout the career or life?
Well, honestly, it's got to be patience.
Yes, patience is a very underrated virtue. You're right. You got to weather that out. I would say patience and resilience. Let me go to others. Others, one, I'd like to ask you that if you had to predict, if there were 100 rupees being spent in CSR over the next 12-18 months, where would those 100 rupees go?
Yeah, so very interesting question, Anurag, and we have actually been discussing on this a lot with the corporates and understanding which direction they're looking at. So I think one, in fact, Mugdha also mentioned at the beginning, was healthcare is now at the forefront. So healthcare would definitely be at the top of the priority. When we look at healthcare, healthcare is also a very large area within itself. When we're talking about the infrastructure of healthcare, we're talking about preventive health, we are talking about nutrition, we are talking about awareness generation. So healthcare is a very large area within itself. And that would be at the top of the priority of companies. Second is skill development. Skill development because now you need a different set of skills. It needs to be realigned. The entire skill industry sector has to be relooked at because you're not having physical centers. Now, most of the classes are having online. Now, even for the healthcare sector, so very interestingly, we are seeing a lot of skill development is happening actually in the healthcare domain. So there are more paramedics being created. There are more special skill courses being designed on the same. So healthcare skill is something which is very important because skill has to be relevant skill. It cannot be just the age-old typical skill development which you were doing because there are not jobs anymore on those lines. So say there were so many skill development courses happening on retail sector, but the retail sector is not expected to bounce back in the near future. So there'll be complete realignment what we are seeing. Thirdly is again education happens to be very important. So it will continue to dominate, and hygiene. So I think one big area which was never looked at was the hygiene and sanitation, and that has also come to the forefront. So these are the four broad topics, and healthcare again, which was a priority, but now that will be the number one priority. Healthcare and hygiene will dominate. One very interesting aspect, Anurag, I would like to mention as well is that the COVID scenario has, we are seeing the companies, and you had also mentioned in the beginning that whether companies are doing CSR for PR perspective or they genuinely want to do. COVID has touched everyone. And once people saw the kind of, majority of the people who have been born and brought up in a metro city did not even know the reality. And when the migrant crisis happened, a lot of people were touched. They realized there is something much bigger issue out there. And that is where even internally companies have now started taking keen interest of what their own employers are doing as part of CSR. So it is now not any more about the budget and other thing. It's more about companies are realizing this is an integral part of the business. Taking care of society is an integral part of the business, and it's not only about just compliance issue, that X amount of money I have to spend. We also look at the shared value approach. Companies are also now going to look at how the products can actually impact community. So it's not only about just spending of the budget, but can you come up with products accordingly? And we already seeing those very interesting concepts. Like so many companies ventured into the low-cost ventilator space. But it was not also a charity. Some of the companies have now started.
Great point.
Yeah. So in fact, we are seeing companies looking at shared value approach, how they can use a business expertise to drive social change, and this is what we expect will continue in the years to come. So there's going to be a drastic change, I expect, after 6 months down the line, when at least things become a bit normal. Companies are going to drive the thought process is going to change, the strategy is going to change, and CSR is going to be a boardroom discussion rather than just a compliance issue. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Adarsh. I want to ask you, what's your one lockdown lesson that you learned during the last 7 months that will help you throughout your career in life?
So one is, again, as you were traveling at the drop of the hat, I was doing the same. I was practically out 15 days, 20 days a month. So I think spending time with family has been a very big, you can say, a blessing as well. In terms of learning, understanding and being empathetic towards each of our team members has been very important, because everyone is going through different scenarios in different conditions, because our teams are there across different geographies and the challenges are there across. So again, understanding and being empathetic on different conditions, I think, has been one of the key learning as well.
And Adarsh, when do you think the economy will be back? In 6 months, 12 months, or 18 months? When you talk to these corporates, what's the sense you get?
So Anurag, actually, I have a very different take. When we look at, I believe the corporate will actually gain from the entire pandemic. But when I say corporate will gain, we are talking about the SMEs losing out. So SMEs, so a lot of sectors which were unorganized. Now, what we are seeing during the pandemic, their sales is going up because the unorganized sector is struggling. So the corporate sector, the large organizations will actually grow, especially the ones which were working where there was a fair share of the unorganized sector. But that might not be good for the overall economy, because the SME sector is the largest job creator. So again, to give a timeline, I think we need at least a 12 months period before we bounce back. 12 months.
Mugdha, nutrition is such an important subject. While it's part of the food and nutrition, a part of the SDG goals, we don't realize that nutrition is possibly the most important ingredient for our health. The kind of food you eat, how much you eat, and holistic well-being happens through, nutrition is a big driver. Of course, exercise, right quality of sleep, and that can bring down, as you rightly said, the comorbidity and also help you deal with COVID. Give us thumb rules that people who are at high risk can do to bring down the risk of COVID.
Absolutely wonderful question. Thank you so much for asking this. Right. So, very, very simple things that people can do. One is Indians genetically are primed towards diabetes. India is like the diabetes capital of the world. And that's because of an underlying condition. Like, I don't want to get too technical here, but because of something called as insulin resistance, which if you study the data, is one of the top comorbidities that creates fatal outcomes with the COVID-19 infection. So if people have to really start reversing that, and if they have to, like the minute you start fixing your diabetes, a lot of the inflammation in your body goes down, your body becomes so much more resilient. So one thing I would recommend is people really start getting assessed for their diabetes risk. Pre, post COVID doesn't matter, but like get that done. And if you do have some indicators that are showing you that you are progressing towards diabetes, because like I said, genetically we are earmarked for that, start working on reversing that. A couple of things you could do. It's easy for me to say, a lot of people find it hard to believe, is get rid of all vegetable oils. So, all these cooking oils, the safflower, sunflower, all these vegetable oils, because they are rich in something called as polyunsaturated fatty acids. Again, I don't want to get too technical, but these PUFAs.
And what is the alternative to them?
Yes, I'll come to that. So people can switch to using things like coconut oil or ghee also for making their food. The other thing that you can really boost your immunity and make you more resilient towards not just COVID, but any pathogen, right? Any infection, is ensuring you're getting good quality zinc. So making your zinc status really optimal. If you want to do that through food, then animal foods are some of the highest sources of zinc, right? So especially animal organ meat, like in India, people who eat meat often also eat liver and all of that. But animal foods are a really good source of zinc. If you're plant-based, if you're vegan, then I would really recommend getting a good quality zinc supplement. The second thing is, when it comes to nutrients, is vitamin D. So vitamin D has been shown in randomized control trials currently in the last 6 months in ICU units that people who are administered extra vitamin D didn't even need ventilators. It is that potent a nutrient in helping you fight infections, and guess where it comes from? It comes from the sun, right? So ensuring you get adequate sun exposure. Now, if you are in a lockdown, if it's raining like the way it's raining across the country and you can't get out in the sun, then I would recommend on those days, again, supplementing with good quality vitamin D. So zinc and vitamin D, 2 supplements that I would recommend. Of course, apart from that, the standard guidelines that any good nutritionist would give, like avoid processed food. It's so funny, when the first lockdowns were announced, people were filling their baskets in grocery stores with, instant noodles and biscuits and chips, and those are the last kind of foods that would ever help your body and ever help your immune system. So whole unprocessed food as close to nature as possible is what really works best for human bodies. Supplementing with zinc and vitamin D really will always boost your immunity. Always, it's a good idea to do that. And like I said, making sure you're getting good quality protein. So if you're eating animal products, that's great. And avoiding vegetable oils, because vegetable oils, sugar, all of these are not really what our ancestors ate.
Thank you, Mugdha.
Yeah.
And Mugdha, what's one thing as an entrepreneur, as a solopreneur, what is that one thing that changed in your mental wiring that will help you grow both as a human being and as an entrepreneur?
So I'm not a solopreneur. I actually run a funded company with a team. We in fact got funded during COVID times, and I see that healthcare is really getting the boost it deserves. But what I learned as an entrepreneur, as a CEO, as a founder of a company, are to keep the company going, because if your internal company is breaking down, there's no way you can serve your customers well. And the 2 things that worked really well for Thrive is, one is we had very, very good systems in place that were what we call as idiot proof. So no matter what happened outside, our systems sustained us, right? Like we didn't miss a beat. Lockdown, no lockdown, we continue to do our work, we continue to serve our clients the way we have. Secondly, the culture. So that's something I have always been obsessed about in terms of a company and its culture. So we have, like for the last 1 year, we focused so much on building a culture of radical honesty, transparency, vulnerability, that this thing that, and a lot of our clients are corporate clients. So all the mental health issues that you spoke of, that Vivek spoke of, we've seen those. We've seen people with those issues come to us also, right? But within our team, we really did well, because our culture, it's very hard to explain culture in a tangible way, right?
Culture is strategy in action. And
it is the vision, it is the values.
Culture is when you're not looking back to Mega, we are out of time. So
Yep. It is literally the thing that determines how your company is going to run when nobody is monitoring how it's running, right?
Absolutely.
So
I think
that the
Mugdha,
culture
you made
that
a very
we built is what
important
really
point, and that's exactly what the crux of CSR is at the end of the day, to create and maintain cultures, to create a community, and a strong community at that, because that's the essence of the work culture, or a culture that you would go ahead and incorporate in your societies, amongst your peers, and also amongst your family members and friends.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.